When I was 12 years old, my family had just moved to Dallas, Texas, and we were staying in this house, and I picked up a copy of Life magazine, and it had a big article about homosexuals. But I remember reading it and just being in total shock, thinking, this is who I am. I was terrified. It definitely presented it as sort of this shadowy underlife, and I thought, is this who I am? Am I destined to be sort of this unhappy, shadowy character? I went off to college and dropped out of college and went to San Francisco to become an artist and a hippie. And very quickly I came out, formed a group of friends, and was living on Castro Street when Castro became gay. I like to say that the Castro and I came out at the same time. I was visiting my family in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I went to one of their prayer meetings. And one of the leaders of the meeting stood up and said that he had a prophecy, that God had spoken to him. And there was someone there who was involved in homosexuality. God just wanted that person to know that he loved him and forgave him. And I was thunderstruck. I absolutely believed that this was God singling me out and speaking directly to me. And I didn't want to stop being gay, but I felt that I had to obey what I was being told. So I stood up in the meeting in front of the 1,200 people who were there and said that the prophecy had been directed to me, that I was going to respond and obey. Being part of this very intense group, which in some ways was like a cult, you could say, I was constantly surrounded by people who all thought the same way. I worked in the community. I started working in our publishing business. So I worked in the community. I lived in a household of other community members. I was constantly surrounded by other people who reinforced what I was doing. And I began to build a life there. And so as my life was constantly reinforced by things, many of them positive, that were good, then it became easier and easier to have this gay part of me, this gay past, just sort of compartmentalized and put off on a shelf, and just to focus on the other things going on in my life. I was conscious. I thought about the fact that I was gay every single day. It's not that I would go months without even being aware of this. I was always aware that I was gay. I was always aware that this was unresolved. We thought that somehow I thought if I just did what was right, God would take care of all of that somehow. And so I tried to sort of wall it off and close it off. I really loved my wife. I certainly loved our family. During the years that the kids were growing up, my whole family life was so engrossing that in some ways it didn't bother me that much to keep that big part of me compartmentalized over to the side. But as the years went by and that strain was telling, then it was the struggle. How do I make this break? How do I uproot my whole life now that I've built around this one identity? Because what I realized is I had built my entire life around an identity that I just didn't feel I could sustain anymore. And that was the most challenging thing. It was the fact that to accept this meant having to basically tear my whole life apart. The turning point for me came, believe it or not, on September 11th, 2001. I happened to be on a plane that morning and landed just 15 minutes before the first plane hit the World Trade Center. My wife and youngest son, we had just moved to Washington, D.C., so they were in Washington, not very far from the Pentagon. It was the type of moment when you just, that really makes you stop and evaluate your life and what you're doing. I had to drive back from Chicago, and in the car on the way back, I was thinking all these things over, and I thought, I can't pretend that I'm really making this work. I can't pretend that I'm being successful doing this. I have to just take the step, be honest, and make some kind of change. I wasn't even sure what that would be. About 1 month later, I came to my wife one evening and said, I have something I've got to tell you. She blanched. She said, are you having an affair? I said, no, but I cannot not be gay anymore. And she said, that's worse. Because she knew, and I knew, that what that meant was our marriage was going to end. About 6 months later then, we separated. She moved away, and that was when I came out again for the second time. I did not expect I was going to be deliriously happy coming out as gay at 50 years old, middle-aged man, bald, a little on the chubby side. I thought I probably would not be very well accepted, that I'd have a hard time meeting people. I just felt I had to do this. But you know what? It really did. It was amazing. In a very short time, I met a large number of guys my age who were warm, welcoming, who really helped me, introducing me to friends, helping me build a new life. A year after my wife left, I met the man who's now my partner. He was living in Des Moines, Iowa. We connected immediately. We had a lot of, we met in DC when he was visiting friends. We connected immediately just on a lot of levels. We had a lot of common things in our experience. And we began seeing each other. A year later, he moved to DC, and we now have a very wonderful life together.